Over the past couple days, Trump's approach to the events regarding the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran has shaken many people on the populist right. Some began to wonder if the political commentator Nick Fuentes, who had previously said a Trump election would mean war with Iran, was right. Despite Nick being pretty much totally wrong about everything up until now, recent events appeared to vindicate him, and he appeared to have been perversely proven correct. Well, let me tell you, first, there hasn't even been a war yet as of the recording of this video. Don't get me wrong, I myself thought there would be a war, that it was more likely than not. My belief was that it was more probable than not that Trump wouldn't be able to cut a deal that would satisfy both Israel and Iran. Given the tension with Israel being directly struck and Iran being cornered, with their entire political class being threatened, I thought it was unlikely that Trump would be able to mediate the situation. Whether he wants to or not, that was my point. It's potentially the Kobayashi Maru of foreign policy situations. Can he even say no? That was unclear to me. Also, everyone's already aware that the late Sheldon Adelson was Trump's biggest donor in 2016 and 2020, and now obviously Miriam Adelson, his wife, was Trump's biggest donor in 2024. It's common knowledge the Adelsons are billionaires and associated with pro-Likud think tanks and media outlets. Likud is Netanyahu's party. So it's easy to see how, even if Trump doesn't need the $100 million she donated to him, Trump is still potentially obligated to Miriam. And obviously, she's going to want him to act in line with the interests of whatever faction of Likud she's associated with. So it would make perfect sense that Trump, with his brash peace through strength style, would probably take a hard line with Iran, issuing massive dramatic threats as a deterrent. That could easily escalate things, especially if the Iranians actually feel cornered. And remember, again, Syria fell only a couple months ago. So the dots definitely kind of connect. I also think that even if Trump was given $100 million, the choice of Vance or Rubio as future GOP leaders heavily imply he's concerned with his political legacy, making it less likely he's actually willing to just burn this bridge and not look back for the money. Because even with all the Democrats coming after him and trying to bleed him dry with all the lawfare, he's still loaded. So I don't really think he needed $100 million. But anyways, even if we do end up going to war with Iran, Nick Fuentes still wouldn't be right because Kamala certainly wouldn't have handled this situation any better. It's important to remember the framing because some people were collapsing. Some people were having full on meltdowns. I know someone who signed a Nick Fuentes was right apology form. I mean, bro, you know who you are who did this. Have some self-respect, have some backbone, don't grovel. Um, but even if we had gone to war with Iran, Nick Fuentes still wouldn't have been right because his framing of this issue was that Trump is the pro-war candidate and there won't be war with Iran if Kamala gets elected. That was really what he was suggesting to people. The thing is, this isn't like any other previous American engagement in the Middle East because Israel is directly involved. If Israel's security is directly threatened by the Iranian army, this pretty much can't be turned down, no matter what. This is not invading Iraq or Afghanistan or another Muslim country most Americans can't point out on a map under the vague pretext of terrorism again. There would be some serious repercussions, like the Samson option pictured here, if we were to just sit back and watch Iran have boots on the ground in Israel. And what we saw in the current situation is that Israel is basically goading Iran into a direct attack. The left would definitely put boots on the ground if Israel's existence was threatened because, as I've said before, it's a cornerstone of the Anglo-liberal world order. And the Nick Fuentes narrative was that the fix was in from the beginning. According to Nick, Trump was always just a puppet for foreign interests, and he was strongly hinting to his followers to vote Democrat to cause Trump to lose the election. The whole conceit of Groyper War II was to disrupt the election. This is stupid because even if you assume he was right about Trump's supposed true allegiances, Democrats still obviously have more institutionalized power than Republicans. Democrats have their own very hawkish globalist attitude, and they similarly wouldn't be able to say no even if there's a vocal pro Palestine faction among their voter base at the moment. I'll be clear about this. If it turns out Trump orders boots on the ground in Iran, yeah, you might as well just vote for the Green Party from now on. I will say that right here and now. Though you got to keep in mind the dynamics of GOP voters at the moment. Trump did promise no new wars, and that's definitely part of his mandate. It would be a betrayal if he put boots on the ground in Iran. It would be a terrible thing. But there are something like 80 million white evangelicals in this country who virtually all voted for him and who virtually all would be comfortable with the U.S. aggressively defending Israel if they ever felt push actually came to shove. So, in no sense at any time has Trump ever had anything close to an anti Zionist mandate. Um, in other words, the situation isn't clearly entirely in Trump's hands in the first place, and he also doesn't have a lot of the expectations from his voter base that some of the people who are already wringing their hands and catastrophizing over this situation, signing the Nick was right apology forms, saying Trump betrayed the American people, seem to think he does. And I'm saying this as someone who's a staunch Presbyterian who believes in covenant theology, not dispensationalism. I think it's stupid, but I'm simply recognizing the political reality of the situation as it is. Also, as two side points, one, predicting war with Iran isn't remarkable either because Israel is like a crisis point for any of you who may also be terminally online losers who play paradox games. It's like a crisis in the game Victoria, too. In other words, there are just areas of the world that are geopolitically contentious. The specter of war constantly looms there. I'd say, North Korea, Taiwan, Russia, Kashmir, and of course, the Middle East would be the main examples. Um, and this is just these areas. Something's always potentially going to go down here, no matter who's in charge of the U.S. Basically. And two, the assassination attempt confirms something is at stake. If Trump is a puppet for foreign interests, who would want a bullet in Trump's head and why if he's already controlled? People who are really serious about continuing the notion or defending the notion that Trump is really just controlled op basically have to begin denying that this event was real to remain consistent. You have to begin saying that it was staged. And just to add on a third small side point here, Nick is obviously controlled opposition himself. Love him or hate him, the fact his bank accounts were frozen by the feds is legitimately suspicious. I don't care if you like or dislike the guy. This is a red flag that someone has been compromised. God forbid if I ever somehow myself wound up in this scenario, I'd blink twice so you could all know I'm being held against my will, and then you guys can just leave comments clowning me, asking what my handler really thinks about the situation, or or just giving the opposite advice of whatever I say. But yeah, recently I had a couple people come to me losing their minds over this situation, saying it's so over. One of them, as I said before, even signed a Nick Fuentes apology form. So I figured at this point in the video, I'd explain some of the mental tools I use to arrive at the conclusions that I do. So first, you consider all actors, agents, their interests, their hard lines in the sand, vulnerabilities, and constraints. Then you consider multiple possibilities based on potential courses of action, and then rule out less likely outcomes and assume there may be some factors which can't be accounted for. Kind of like how scientists claim there's dark matter, which makes up a ton of the universe, supposedly. Personally, I suspect this is because their calculations are off, but you get the point. There are factors and variables which are not visible to the public, but still influence behavior. Also, it's important to always have a dynamic view of American government. For instance, for Trump as an actor, there are clear limitations on his power in the way there just weren't for previous presidents. There's this article, which is one among countless others, I'm sure, which demonstrates there are parts of the government which just actively resist him. Um, and because there are these clear limitations on his power as a president, you can compare this to the behavior of Bush or Obama or FDR. On paper, are all presidents equally powerful? Maybe in a legal constitutional sense. Practically, absolutely not. FDR presided over the massive growth of the American government and orchestrated the transition of the American government from a bourgeois to a managerial state. No president since has been this powerful, and Bush and Obama are each arguably more powerful than Trump because they clearly had the support of the American intelligence state. And this isn't to suggest that Trump is perfect, that he's going to fix everything, or that he hasn't made some serious mistakes. But if you're going to assert he's merely a one dimensional puppet, it raises a lot of questions about how and why power appears to operate in this country the way that it does. There's definitely mass manipulation and performative fake conflict in politics. That is absolutely true. But then at the same time, there are real competing powers, and politics is actually cutthroat. Also, another thing to pay very close attention to is the absolute letter of what is said by world leaders. There is always a lot of posturing and gesturing, and not a lot of confirmations of direct military action. Nick isn't right literally until the US puts boots on the ground. I don't care if people accuse me of coping for pointing this out, and war eventually does break out. There's no war until there's officially, clearly war. We're not even in a Korean war that's not a war military action situation. There are not US troops in Iran fighting the Iranian army that we know of yet. The thing I initially thought was unlikely now happened. But anyway, to have true insight into politics is to have a robust theoretical model of how it all works inside of your mind. You know the saying, only a Sith speaks in absolutes. I think my own political philosophy is more in line with me being a Sith Lord rather than a Jedi, but you get the point. To build this model, after a person is done considering the interests of all actors and agents in a situation and all potential outcomes, then they should narrow it down to which one they think is most likely and why. And after the event in question transpires, run the whole situation back. What ended up happening? Why? Did it meet our expectations? Why or why not? When trying to make a forecast or prediction, the political situation in question must be treated like a science experiment. Even though the discipline is totally run by idiot liberals in academia, politics still has a definite science, and political science is a legitimate subject. And for what it's worth, I cover topics because I think they'll start fun and entertaining conversations. Otherwise, it's utterly beneath me to say things just because I think people will agree with them online. Like over my career as Red Channels, I've said positive things about the Crusades, the Chinese Communist Party, and the Nation of Islam on this channel. Longtime viewers already know me saying things that push their boundaries or piss them off. Kind of comes with the territory. So, I've had like actual real life relationships with blood family members be like irreparably damaged because they found out I was conservative, I was right wing, I was a Trump supporter, etc. Life is short, and please, dear God, avoid seeking any sort of validation online whatsoever if you can help it. Always remember to just be yourself, and don't worry. Sometimes things just go horribly, inexplicably wrong, and that's life. Anyways, I hope you liked this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative, engaging, interesting. I don't know. A lot. Interesting time to be alive. Interesting time to be alive. I'm glad. I'm glad I live in this particular century. Um, that's it for this video, and Red Channels will catch you in the next one.